After his infancy and escape to Egypt, there's only one gospel story about Jesus as a youth.
Well, there's been a lot of speculation and discussion about Jesus. I've been fascinated all my life. We're going to learn a lot today from our special guest. Welcome to Celebrate Michigan. I'm Dennis Neubacher.
And I'm Chris Benson. Joining us today is Chris Stepien, a journalist who spent his career asking tough questions and telling intriguing stories. In his book, 3 Days, The Search for the Young Messiah, Chris weaves a tale of 12-year-old Jesus based on just a dozen verses in the second chapter of Luke's Gospel.
Welcome to Celebrate Michigan, Chris. Nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
What a
It's
pleasure.
Oh, yes.
A veteran of television wars and a journalist for many, many years.
Yes.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough. I always say God takes care of his fools. So when I was ready to graduate from Wayne State University, my last year I did two internships back to back at Channel 7, and that led to a job that lasted 8.5 years. And a lot of great opportunities, worked with a lot of wonderful people, and worked my way up in the business and learned a lot.
Yeah, you got a very interest early on writing a book someday, and this is what you've done. It's like a faith journey, I think you've gotten into here, Chris, from what I can see.
Well, without a doubt, this is not by any stretch. 3 Days, The Search for the Boy Messiah is not by any stretch a business endeavor. It came out of my faith life. This is the one and only story about Jesus as a child, and I think it's an unusual story because for those people who aren't familiar with it, there are 12 verses in the Gospel of Luke that tells a story about Jesus going with his parents to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover, which all good Jews did. But the scholars believe this could have been Jesus' first trip to Jerusalem, for his first Passover there, old enough to go, if you know what I mean. And he celebrates the Passover with his family and the whole town of Nazareth, the caravan that would have gone along. They're there for about a week, and then they head back to Nazareth. And as the gospel story goes, they get out of town for a day and hit camp, and he's not in the camp. He's not in the caravan. And his mom and dad, Mary and Joseph, obviously are panicked, and they continue searching for him for 2 more days, 3 full days, and then they find him in the temple, astonishing the wise scribes and scholars with his wisdom. And his mother, like all good mothers, had some questions. Son,
where have you been?
Why have you done this to us?
Right.
Your father and I have been searching for you with great anxiety. And Jesus said, why have you been searching for me? Didn't you know I must be in my Father's house? And other translations say about my Father's business. Now, how did he really say that? A lot of people read that and think, oh, that's kind of flippant way to talk to your mom. But perhaps he touched her face warmly and said it very tenderly and looked at his father and with affection. And then the rest of the verses say that, he went back with them to Nazareth and obeyed them and grew in wisdom and stature, and his mom treasured this in her heart. Mm-hmm. So that was it's a story that any family can relate to, because if you have a child or children, every parent has experienced losing their kid, even if it's only been for a few seconds. You're in a department store or at an amusement park and your kid is out of sight and you panic. But few of us have lost a child for 3 days.
Absolutely.
So from my perspective as a Catholic, as a Christian, and a parent of 2 sons, husband, father, I can relate to this. So this is the ultimate family story that in some ways I think is overlooked in the Christian church, and so I thought it would be good to bring it to the attention of people in general, both Catholics and Christians and just readers. Mm-hmm.
Was there a moment that inspired you to write this story? Did you always just wonder? Or was there just a minute you remember where you say, okay, this is it? And then I imagine the story just came out fully formed and it wasn't hard and just...
It's not easy to write a book.
Is that how it was?
Not exactly. It wasn't miraculous, except it did come out of my prayer life. This is not something I planned to do. This was not something I thought about, wow, this would make a great story to tell. I became very sick about 10 years ago, and I spent a month in the hospital, had emergency surgery. One doctor later said, you were swirling around the drain, my friend.
Wow.
And so being Catholic, I felt, I turned to my rosary. And for those people who don't know why Catholics pray the rosary, it's actually a meditation. And each 10 beads on the rosary represents a different gospel story. And they're called mysteries. And the joyful mysteries represent the early part of Jesus' life. And this was one of the mysteries. And so I made this deal with Mary. I said, I need you to get me closer to your son, and I'm going to pray 1 decade a day. It was kind of an arrogant deal. But it gave me time to contemplate the stories. And I would ponder this and try to put myself there. St. Ignatius of Loyola, I call him St. Iggy. He's famous for these Ignatian spiritual exercises where you try to pretend you're actually in the gospel story and read it over a few times. So I would ponder this. And so over the years, this wore on me, the friction wore on me. And as a parent, it finally penetrated my thick skull. And I said, this is an amazing story that deserves more attention. And so, to your point, Chris, I began wondering more about it. And then eventually a voice in my heart said, do something with this story. To the point that one day I said, what?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, but unlike us, our faith journey, we question it at times. Like you said, things happen in our lives that make us wonder. But Jesus, it sounds like Jesus knew right from the start that he was special, but he didn't think. You know, I'm trying to ask this question properly. Did he know that he was the Messiah?
That's a great question, and it's a one I had to tackle when writing this. But to answer your question and your previous question, I had the outline to work from. So I had these 12 verses. I had a storyline, and that's all. And I had my contemplations. And so in this book, Jesus is aware of his future through dreams. He has, for lack of a better word, nightmares. Certainly he knew that he was the Messiah, but Christians believe that he's fully human and fully divine. So I tried to establish his humanity. You know, at 12 years old, he probably had zits, he had body odor. He had a hobby, a favorite food.
Yeah, we don't think generally of those things, but that's
not
the case.
something you learn in church or in school.
He was real. He was real. And I think it's important to think of him that way because it makes it so powerful that you have a God who understands your humanity, your pain, your joy, your desire to kick back on a sunny day and not go to school. He probably went to school 6 days a week and studied nothing but the Torah or the books of the Old Testament.
It was a way of life for him. This
No
is
question.
what he did all the time.
Although, to be accurate, I should say, if you talk to Amy Jill Levine at the Vanderbilt University, she's a scholar, she'll say there may be some question as to whether there were rabbinical schools or there were schools in small towns like Nazareth.
Wow. Yeah. Well, we're going to go to a break and we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
I want to see the world.
When you pick up a book,
I used to read every night to all the younger kids,
and let your imagination break free, you won't believe how much fun it can be.
let down your house.
Experience a world of adventure, excitement, and endless possibilities. Get tangled up in a good book. Explore new worlds. Read. Visit read.gov today.
Welcome home, man.
Yo, check out this chef, right? Right? That's so gay. That's really gay. Dude, look at those hands.
Please don't say that.
What?
Don't say that something is gay when you mean that something is dumb or stupid. It's insulting. It's like if I thought this pepper shaker was stupid and I said, man, and this pepper shaker is so 16-year-old boy with a cheesy mustache. Just saying. When you say that's so gay, do you realize what you say? Knock it off.
My name's Reggie. Just recently, my wife and I took in her sister's children. Now, we already had 4, so I went from becoming a family man to a man with a bigger family. Now, you can't eat love, so I don't know how I'm gonna feed them tonight. How was that, Rich?
I think I look more like Denzel.
That's cold, man.
Play a role in ending hunger. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger and find your local food bank.
Welcome back to Celebrate Michigan. I'm Dennis Neubacher.
And I'm Chris Benson. Joining us today is Chris Stepien, author of 3 Days, The Search for the Boy Messiah. Chris, tell us about the historical evidence that you, I'm sure, came across, went looking for, researched for this book.
Well, there is a lot of historical evidence about the times. In fact, I should say one of the great resources that was shared by a priest with me was called Jesus and His Times. It was a Reader's Digest publication back from 1987. It's over 300 pages filled with images of artifacts, illustrations, and was compiled by a number of scholars, revered scholars, for example, at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And they had a team of 10 writers taking all this information. So I learned a lot, like his name, his Hebrew name was Yeshua, which would be Yeshua, which would be means salvation. Yeah. They had toys. The kids had toys like jacks, some board games, even animal pull toys, where archaeologists discovered these things. His home would have probably been 2 rooms, an outer room. Remember, he says when you go to pray, go into your inner room, close the door and pray. The reason is your outer room, maybe you had your sheep and your pigeons or your chickens out there. In the yard was where Mary would have made bread on a hearth and ground the grain to make the flour. And then the inner room was the inner room where you slept and prayed and these kind of things. But there are all kinds of resources like Jordan Rubin's book, The Maker's Diet, which is all about food, biblical foods. And there's tons of information online.
Sounds like a hard life, to be honest with you, Chris.
Yes.
Sounds like a very hard life.
So when
your faith had to be extremely important to you at that time.
That's key. That's very key. In fact, when you think of that, when Jesus says, "Don't worry about tomorrow. Today has enough worries," he was telling that to people who had much more difficult lives.
Look at the birds. They don't worry about what they're going to eat or how they're going to be clothed.
So why are we worried? Yeah. So if he was telling that to people in those... So I think it's critical to understand the context in which he was speaking. If we had more time, we could go into the conversation with the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman. And he says, "Whoever drinks the water I shall give will never thirst." Well, that was a desert dweller's dream. They were in the desert. People had to think about water constantly. So when he was offering her that, she says, "Give me this water." Right. Which is no surprise. But if we, in our day, we have vitamin water, sparkling water, filtered water, tap water. So we can't relate. But by digging into the history, and this is partly what the book does, it makes Jesus three-dimensional. It makes him real. It gives you an appreciation for the life he lived and more meaning in the things that he said.
Yeah, but he had, my parents were very influential in my life. How influential and how supportive were Joseph and Mary in Jesus' life?
Good question.
Oh, I think amazingly. I mean, if they searched for him for 3 days, and
or did they play the devil's advocate? Excuse me for using the word devil, but were they there constantly helping guide and Jesus?
Well, we could only assume that, and we have to think that definitely they were. Mary was at the foot of the cross with John, the disciple John, and Jesus from the cross, dying, obviously with his last breath. And the concept of a crucifixion is about suffocation. You literally die because you can't breathe. He finds the breath to say, "Woman, behold your son. Son, behold your mother."
For his mother to watch her son die in front of him must have been terrible.
Right. So I actually go into conversations between Mary and Joseph, including their courtship, and when she tells him that she's pregnant and they're engaged and they have not consummated their engagement. And as you know, the gospel, the Bible says that he was prepared to divorce her. So I go through that conversation and the conversation subsequent after he has the dream in which he's told it's okay to marry her. So I tried to look at their lives realistically.
Well, not only did he have the spiritual background from his being Jesus, but he had the everyday life that made him who he was as a human being and as also our spiritual leader.
Well, it's the point of being a Christian. A Christian means to follow a follower of Christ. So imagine following somebody who was a superhero, who had superpowers. You'd go, well, how can I relate to that? I mean,
loved Superman when I was growing up.
Of course.
That's it.
But as soon as you fell the first time you jumped off the back porch, you realized you couldn't fly.
Oh my goodness.
But if this person who you follow has endured the same pains and reveled in the same joys as you, then it becomes more real. And the things that he says and asks you to do are doable if you trust.
And Chris, we have just a couple minutes before our break, and,
Okay.
and we know we're all on the edge of our seat and tense in the conversation.
We're going to hear him sing, too.
What has the reaction been from faith leaders of all traditions, not just Christians? Have you had reaction from different faiths?
I've had the great fortune to meet a number of people of different faiths. In fact, Rabbi Dorit Edut is the founder of Detroit Interfaith Outreach Network, and I've attended a number of meetings. She actually has written a testimonial about the book. She says it's a good Mishnah, which in modern times is a rabbinical interpretation of Scripture. As I have done here, I've taken 12 verses and tried to say what could have happened, and the whole time wanted it to be plausible. And also, I didn't speak for Jesus, in case some people are wondering, how do you write a novel? This is a novel. How do you write a novel in dialogue for Jesus? Everything he says in the book is a scriptural quote, and perhaps 90% from the Old Testament, because I didn't want to put words in his mouth. So I figured if I use the Word of God, then I was on firm ground.
Just to be aware of that, was there any people that were opposed to the fact that you took this topic and wrote about it in this way? Have you had any reaction that way?
Not so far.
Wonderful.
Not so far. Yeah, and but as someone who spent my life in the media, I'm always ready for a critic.
Absolutely.
Well, you said, we talked about this during the break, that Jesus may be the most fascinating figure in our time. From previous history to today, everybody talks about him. You can talk, and there's so many conversations about Jesus. Some will say he was married. And I'm going, well, where'd you find that information? So when you studied this, here you are, he's 12, and then he's crucified at 30. What did you find at all in some of your studies about that 18 years at all? I know it wasn't the point of the book, but what did you find?
I haven't explored it yet, but I'm thinking about a sequel to the book. It will be called 3 Days Full of Grace, and it would be the last 3 days of Mary's life. She'd be living in Ephesus, which was an ancient Greek city, with John, the disciple John, and she will reflect back on her whole life. And remember, because she pondered these things in her heart.
Yeah,
well, we're going to take a short break, but stay tuned for the next part.
Gotcha.
To you, Algebra 2, Foreign Languages, and finally, Biology. Who among you will step up to their challenge?
Me. Yeah, I'll do it. Me too.
Sign me up.
Take on the tough classes now. You need them to prepare for college.
So my uncle calls and he says he's dizzy and he's losing his balance. I'm like, Unc, you want me to take you to a doctor? He's like, no, I'm gonna look up the symptoms. I said, your symptoms are you're dizzy and you're losing your balance. So he said, I can't get on the internet because my arm is numb. I said, well, use your good arm and dial 911.
Stroke's no joke. If you or someone you love is showing symptoms of stroke, don't wait because it might be too late. Dial 911. Time lost is brain lost.
Kind of on a faith journey today on Celebrate Michigan. Hi, I'm Dennis Neubacher, and welcome back to Celebrate Michigan.
I'm Chris Benson. Joining us today is Chris Stepien, author of 3 Days, The Search for the Boy Messiah. Chris, we understand that you wrote a rap song. Now, I would not normally think of Jesus and a rap song together, so help set us up for this. We understand you're going to perform it, but I want to hear a little bit about it, though, first.
Okay, I'm not going to perform it. I'll fake it till I make. I'll fake it to share it, and hope that some recording artist. I'm still working on a recording artist to do it. Yeah. But it just came to me while I was doing some correspondence about the book, and a little rhyme scheme came into my head, and I started writing it down, and then I shared it with my wife, Ellen, and before you know it, I thought, well, this could be a rap lyric, and I thought, this book about 12-year-old Jesus would be a great way to reach young people with the faith and make him relevant and make them understand that he was young as well. And I thought that the rap would be helpful in that. And the feedback that I've gotten with author talks, whether at universities, high schools, schools, or even, general audiences with both older adults and young people, has been very positive. So I usually wrap it at the end, and it works.
The adults think it's a good idea. How about the kids so far?
Yeah, they love it. They love it. Yeah.
Not so much the rap, but just the story. What do you think?
I think that they're enthusiastic, and they ask very, very intriguing questions. Yes. Their questions are at the kid level. The parents, I think, take on, they become a little childlike. They say to me, you made him real, that I could relate to him. I never thought of him that way.
Now, this is the most real way. You're on.
We're ready.
Okay.
So you're the boy Messiah with your bucket at the well. Do they know what's deep inside you, what it's like to conquer hell? Ain't life tough away from heaven, often ugly, cold and old? Even if you're only 7, they expect you're good as gold. So you're the boy Messiah, and you're from a tiny town. Was a virgin mom that had you, but your real dad ain't around. At 12, you were a little man, climbed up to Temple Hill, muscles tight, desert tan, with little lambs to kill. So you're the boy Messiah, and you're in Jerusalem. Passover dinner's for you, and the party's good for them. They ate the food and prayed a lot, and then they all went home. You stayed behind. We don't know why. The temple courts to roam. So you're the boy Messiah, and they're on a 3-day search to save the life God gave you so you can start your church. Your mom and dad are crying, fighting hard to keep their hope. They're inside the temple Zion where they find the strength to cope. So you're the boy Messiah, back at home in Nazareth. The people there deny you, and the world will hold its breath. When will you do that savior deed to keep your daddy's promise, to plant on earth a holy seed that grows new life inside us? So you're the boy Messiah with your bucket at the well. Do they know what's deep inside you, what it's like to conquer hell? Yo, yo.
Oh, wow. Like it.
Or amen? I'm not sure what to say.
Is the rap song in the book?
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's just something that, and I could, because it's self-published right now, and I could update it for Amazon and the ebook. But soon the book should be released through Dynamic Catholic by Matthew Kelly. And that's a very unique program where books are printed and sold to churches and organizations very, very inexpensively in large quantities. And they are given to people for free as they leave church on Christmas and Easter. So I was very honored to have that. We just had a publishing agreement. And so hopefully sometime in the next year, we'll see that. And the benefit of those books is to make people, who sometimes are called creasters. They come to church on Christmas and Easter to come back to church. That hopefully a book will hook them. Matthew Kelly's he's a best-selling author of business books. He also happens to be a very dynamic Catholic. And that program has reached, it's reached over 4,000 American Catholic churches, and they sold over 5 million books and CDs in the last 5 years.
I can see this as a textbook, too.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
Easily.
Did you have any idea that it would take on this life?
No, to be truthful with you, I didn't even intend on publishing it. After writing it, I said to my wife, Ellen, I said, well, maybe we'll just treat it as an ebook, and it'll be something that if we're blessed to have grandkids, one of them will read it. I really, sincerely did it as a spiritual effort. I had that voice. In fact, I thought about doing it as a screenplay, but I didn't know enough about the times.
That would work.
And then as I explored the times, there was just too much for me to get my arms around. And I thought, well, I've never written a book, but I'm not writing this to be on a bestseller list, so I'll just put it down.
Well, you speak with such enthusiasm, so this is probably a silly question to ask. Has this strengthened your faith?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, oftentimes when I'm speaking in front of audiences at churches or schools, I do get choked up because I share the story, the faith journey that led me to write this, and the experience of illness and recovery and just seeing Jesus as a child and praying the rosary and connecting to God through his mother. And it chokes me up. I mean, it does.
Yeah. You know, and maybe another silly question, but what, in your studies, what stood out the most about Jesus? I mean, there's a ton of things that we can talk about, but what for you stood out the most about Jesus?
In a word, love. I mean, the thing that was startling, you know, because I wanted to use Old Testament quotes from him in dialogue because they would be contemporary. The New Testament wasn't much there yet, right? Obviously. Right. But I found love throughout the Old Testament. I found a merciful God throughout the Old Testament. A lot of times people say, well, in the Old Testament, you know, God is all fire and brimstone, and then when Jesus comes, it's like, that's not true. The Old Testament is filled with mercy and love and everlasting love, and that was beautiful that I found that and there's a section of Proverbs chapter 8. If you ever want to be amazed, read Proverbs chapter 8. Inspiring. It's lengthy, but it establishes that Jesus was there. It speaks about wisdom and that he was there from before creation. It is a beautiful, and it's in the book.
He had that wisdom as a child. I mean, not many children have that.
Right.
Because they were astonished at it.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, and for those who are watching this show, I just want to make sure if they are interested in looking up the book online, they can go to www.theboymessiah.com, correct?
Correct.
Correct. And then just the little time we have left, what you've described this as love, was it healing for you as well?
Oh, without a doubt. I actually took a year off to help get the word out about the book, and it was one of the best years of my life. And I'm just glad I took the time.
And we're so glad you're here to share it with us as well.
Yeah. Good luck with the sequel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Great question.
You bet. Well, thank you for saying that. That's all we have for you here. Thanks for joining us on Celebrate Michigan. Get a chance to look at the credits after, all the students, all the people that work here at Madonna University to put this show together. Pretty special people as well.
Thank you.
You betcha.